Morning.
All right, February the 1st. How was January, everybody? Did y'all see my email from last night? Did you do some reflection on the last couple of weeks? Who wants to tell me something? Come on, we're all friends here. Who had a great January? Who's ahead of their pace? Who needs an extra little session to get motivated again?
No, it's okay. I'll have the
All right. Welcome, Mahir. Mahir, I told Mahir we got a really talkative bunch here, so don't disappoint me now. Mahir, introduce yourself, please. Welcome to Keller Williams and welcome to Roswell's PC program.
Thank you. So my name is Mihir, as he just described, and I just joined Keller Williams in beginning of January. First 2 weeks of January, I did Ignite from home because I had some health issue at that time. And last week was my first full week as a, I would say, real estate agent, and I was in the office pretty much every single day, trying to do stuff, trying to figure out the business, trying to set it up, and clear some of the fog. It got over the weekend. I did a few things where it kind of I understand a little bit better than what I did last week. So that's a good thing in a way.
Beautiful. Every day, like we've said in here before many times, you know you've worked if at the end of the day you are smarter, right? You've learned something you didn't know before, you understand a piece of technology or a script, or you practiced more, or you got a presentation ready, you went and saw some homes, that kind of thing. Secondly, whether you met more people, right? Whether you expanded your exposure, have you built your database? Are there more people that might come to you now than would have come to me in the morning simply because I created value for somebody, right? I was just speaking with Greta a second ago, and we we reminded each other of the fact that we can consider ourselves very well paid concierge, right? Whether it's real estate related or not. If somebody needs a CPA, that's got virtually nothing to do with real estate. But I know a great CPA, and I'd love to introduce them to this particular person because I know that when they meet this particular person, they're going to save some money. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to, one of your biggest tasks as a real estate agent is building up your network and then having a willingness to share your network with those that are most important to you. Okay, those that you want to get into business with. Okay, let's do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll move into the purchase and sale agreements. Okay, so I am looking at the final week in January. And remember, we said the person who adds the most people to their pipeline in the 4th week of January will get a special prize. And that has to be uploaded by the end of this call. And there's not that many people that have posted numbers for the 4th week in January. So I'm going to kindly remind you that that is a highly suggested part of this program. Okay, to have a couple of moments each week where we have a reality check on how are we doing, right? The only way you can fix it or improve is by acknowledging what you got. Okay, you're either on track or you're not on track. There's no judgment, but if you're off track, don't you want to try to get back on track? This is the way it happens. Okay, by having acknowledgments of your results and then allowing me to give you some suggestions on moving forward. Okay, so please take a moment to update all the numbers for the end of the month. And I'll make an announcement at the end of the call today on who gets the special gift. Okay, person who adds the most people to their pipeline in the 4th week of January. Okay, let me give you guys a clue about February. Okay, it's kind of a similar speech to what I said back in the holiday season. Guys, February's got 28 days. 4 of them you're probably going to spend at family reunion. Okay, meaning we are basically operating off of 3 weeks in February instead of 4. So don't come to me at the last week in February and say, oh, it's a shorter month this month. I'm telling you right now, it's a shorter month. Okay, I'm telling you right now, you're going to be away for a few days at family reunion, and the last thing you want to be is thinking about, you know, reporting numbers. You want to enjoy family reunion and meet people. Okay. Now, so I'm going to encourage you, let's push the gas a little harder the first week in February, probably the second week too. And let's go into family reunion knowing that we're ahead of pace. So we're not either dipping out on family reunion events or paying less attention than we should, or reporting mediocre numbers at the end of the month because it's a shorter month. I'm telling you right now, it's a shorter month. Let's make adjustments, okay? Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone want to share anything? Complaints? Feedback? Anything? Come on now.
I will.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was door knocking in a townhome complex while I was waiting for my client, and I talked to this one girl, and sometimes it just amazes me that I'm so stupid, and people that aren't even in the business will say brilliant things that I don't even think about.
You're not stupid. You're smart because you're listening to that person.
Well, she's like talking to me, and I'm like, she just moved in, and I ended up giving her a painter, and we're talking about the neighborhood, and I'm like, do you know anyone in here else who might be thinking about making a move, And she's like, well, there's a dumpster over there at that unit. I know they're doing a lot of work on it. And I thought to myself,
That's smart.
that's so smart. So smart. So I ended up going over there, and it was empty. So now I'm trying to find out the owner so I can follow up. And then I drove around, and there's another dumpster in that same complex.
That's what I needed. It was a
And I'm going to be, that's now like a marker for me to look for.
100%. I love that. I love that. So you're if you let's not tell ourselves bad things about ourselves. Let's tell our things good things about ourselves, right? Even if there's 2 good things you got and 100 bad things you got, just don't tell yourself about the bad stuff. Tell yourself about the 2 things you're good at, and let's focus on that. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're going to spend a little bit of time this morning going through the purchase and sale agreement. All right. I'd like to make a recommendation. All right. Let me make sure that this screen share works properly. Okay, guys, I'd like to make a recommendation. I'd like for you to, you don't have to answer this question out loud, but what I'd like for you to do is ask yourself, do I know how to write a contract? If somebody were to come to me today and say, hey, I want 123 Hill Street, write it up for me. I want you to ask yourself, do I know how to do that? If the answer to that is no, can we please learn how to do it before you reach out to one of us at 9 o'clock at night on the weekend? Okay, let's pretend like we're in the moment now, and let's learn now so that like you don't, it's not a blazing fire emergency at 9 o'clock at night on the weekend when you did not elect at any time prior to that to prepare. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Okay, if there's a part of the contract you don't understand, let's learn it today so that you don't have to be stressed about it in the future. Is that fair? All right, let's go through the most important document of our business outside of an exclusive seller listing agreement. Okay, this is the purchase and sale agreement. Okay, this is to be used in every single contract, every single one of them. Okay, now, couple things. Let's review the structure of an offer for 2 seconds. Okay, the structure of an offer needs to include a pre-approval letter. Okay, the purchase and sale agreement. The next document is going to be the financing document. So it's either going to have the conventional loan exhibit, the FHA loan exhibit, the VA loan exhibit, the USDA loan exhibit, or the all cash exhibit if they happen to be using cash. Okay. The next component is going to be the disclosures. Typically, that's the seller's property disclosure statement, the lead-based paint disclosure statement if it was built prior to 1978, and the community association disclosure statement if it is a part of an HOA with bylaws and whatnot. Okay. And then the other things that we sometimes are seeing now is some form of a cover letter, right? Or a, hey, I want you to, get to know my purchaser. He's working with this wonderful lender. It's a family. They can't wait to raise their kids in your home, yada, yada, to separate yourself from the other 50 offers that are on that property. Make sense? Okay. So here's the purchase and sale. I'll get to all the questions here. Can we do fake contracts in command? Just for the sake of time today, let's do it this way. Tomorrow I'll show you in command when we do kind of part 2 of this, okay? If you're asking, can you like do a mock contract in command and like send it to me or something for review? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted.
Yeah. So you can create like a dummy account, or not a dummy account, but like a dummy client, and play around, drag a variety of contracts in there, disclosure statements, play around with, reading it, hey, what number do I put here, etc. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, here's what we want to do. Obviously, you put the offer date at the top here. Okay, that's the date that the offer is submitted. All right, section A. Please take a couple minutes to read every word of this contract so you fully understand it. I'm just going to give you the raw basics here, okay? All right, section A. This is where we identify which property we're actually trying to buy, right? By the way, the purchase and sale, hopefully this is clear, but the purchase and sale agreement is generally written by the buyer, right? There is such a thing as a reverse offer. We don't see that too often, particularly in this market, but that's where, like, let's say a buyer's come once or twice and they're dragging their feet a little bit, and the seller is ready to, trying to figure out if this person's legitimate and kind of wants to just get to the bottom of it, and says, hey, we'll sell it to you for X, Mr. Buyer. So there's nothing stating exactly that a buyer has to be the one to generate this contract, but generally that's the way it is, okay? My preference personally is to fill out section A, so the formal address, the county, MLS number, the tax ID, and my preference is in section B to attach it, the top box, attached as an exhibit here too. What we're doing is this is the property legal description. This is how the county recognizes the property. Okay, you probably remember from real estate school where it's things like land lot, plat book, page number, district, section, that kind of stuff. Remember all that? Okay, if you email Curran Schwartz at O'Kelly and Sorahan, and if you are getting close to submitting an offer on a particular property, and if you are getting close to taking a listing, there's also a section for this on the listing agreement. You would write Curran and say, can you please send me the legal description for, and this is the easiest way for her to get the information, is send me the property address, send me the seller's name, and send me the county that the home is in. If you give them those 3 pieces of information, it's very easy for Curran to put together. She sends you the legal description, and that will become an exhibit of the contract.
Would you repeat that? The county, the address, and the owner?
Yes, exactly. So the address itself, the county that the home is in, and the owner of the property. That makes it super easy for her to look it up. Okay, it's generally 1 page, and it's a little paragraph that defines basically the way that the county defines that piece of property. Okay, and then it puts everyone on notice that this is the piece of property, according to the county, that the buyer and seller are engaging in a contract to sell. Make sense? So if you check section B1, you can leave 2 and 3 blank. Yes, sir.
Don't we have access to that information too through something that our market center is subscribed to, some internet-based system that we can look that stuff up to?
Hang on 1 second for me. Corey, I just noticed, or I didn't notice it. I saw that you told me. Let me see if I can pull up a cleaner copy. Yes, Michael, there is a system called GSCCA, I believe is what it's called, gscca.org. I believe. That's a subscription that you can purchase. You can get it on your own. I never did that. I just always asked for it. Right. And if I was going into the weekend, right, then like if you're writing an offer on the weekend and you don't have it, then I might check section 1 here and then have a stipulation that says buyer to provide the property legal description by Monday evening or something like that. Okay. All right, hang on 1 second. Let me see who's going to get it first, my assistant or me. Give me 2 seconds to try to pull a newer one up. I'm sorry. Any other questions that I could potentially answer? Anyone?
So I'm struggling with getting Docusign. It's connected. It's just awkward. And I sent a BBA off to my client. He couldn't get it to open. And any tips? Any help?
He couldn't get it to open?
Yeah, he sent me a picture of like where it was stuck or something. Let's see if I can find it.
Without seeing it, I'm not sure if I could give you a ton of assistance on that right this second. But
All I see is Docusign with a blue line where it wasn't fully loading.
okay, y'all see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a transaction from a little while ago. I'm in the documents section under opportunities. I go to the transaction, and this is where all the documents. You guys are watching my command skills live. I'm a little nervous.
Sorry, doing fine.
Bill, were you referencing me when you were talking about writing up an offer and calling on somebody at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night?
No. I appreciate you asking that, but no, I wasn't referencing you.
While you're pulling that up, since there's some dead space in the time, I'll fill it. Good morning, everybody. So I had my first offer that I submitted last night. I was fortunate enough to be at the right time in the right. No, I was fortunate to be at the right place in the right time, or at the right time. Serendipity, and I was at an open house host. I was helping Carrie Veal host an open house, and there happened to be some buyers who came in and they said, I was walking up to them with my card and the sheets on the house, and they said, oh, well, we don't have an agent. And I was like, well, I'm actually coming to give you my business card and I'm happy to help you. And we talked a little bit and they said, yeah, we'd like to put an offer. So I had gone through all this stuff, but once it's going through it like one time, I think it's going to get you, for anybody who hasn't done it yet, like me before yesterday, it's going through the process is definitely a good idea. And I definitely suggest doing it through the Command and Docusign, because there's a lot of stuff on there that you have to figure out if you haven't put the signatures and the initials and figuring out how to do all of that. For somebody who's a little bit used to that kind of stuff, like technology, I'm kind of used to that kind of stuff, so it came naturally. But for those of you who may need a little bit more time, definitely recommend Googling or something like this, or doing a mock offer. It's definitely worthwhile.
Okay, so now, thank you, Corey. Now that I've embarrassed myself and proven that I don't even know my password for Command this morning.
Hold on, Bill, this is 2020.
I know, just work with me. There's not a lot of changes between 2020 and 21. We'll cover any changes between 2021 tomorrow, okay? It's pretty much all the same, especially on the purchase and sale agreement. Okay, so this is an example from a contract where I helped a buddy of mine buy a couple months ago. Okay, so this is the property right here, the county, the tax parcel, the MLS number, and just like I suggested, we checked box 1, B1 here. So we attached the legal description as a part of the contract. Okay, next section is the purchase price. Okay, so this is where you put in the offer price, purchase price to be paid by seller. Closing costs, seller's contribution at closing shall be. Let's spend a second talking about this, okay? If you look, basically everything that is for you to fill out is virtually on page 1, okay? And then pages like 2 through 6 go on to explain all the definitions of everything on the front page. The way that the closing cost reads in the contract is it basically says that the buyer is responsible for every single cost of purchasing the property and of obtaining financing to purchase the property. Okay, then the next line basically says, and then the seller will contribute X number of dollars to those costs. Okay, so if the answer to this is 0, so we put in 0 because we were in multiple offers. Okay. My buyer was responsible for all of the costs associated with buying and financing the home. Now, before you fill out this contract, as we've stated a number of times, we want to make sure that you know what the closing costs are. Really, more importantly, the buyer knows what the closing costs are, right? Which means that you need to have seen what's called a loan worksheet from your lender, from the buyer's lender, as quickly as possible, okay? Because we want to know specifically for that property, what are the escrows, what are the taxes, when is the closing going to be, so how many days of prepaid interest is it going to be, and what type of loan are they getting, what's the down payment they're getting, and all of that together will help them understand what's going to be the total of the escrows and the closing costs. What we don't want to happen is for no one to really know what that number is. And in an effort to win the multiple offer, you put less than you should or less than you really want to, and then the buyer can't come up with the money at closing. Make sense? So the buyer needs to be responsible for their down payment and whatever closing costs are not paid by the seller. Now, virtually 100 times out of 100, if you're in multiple offers, one of the most important things that a seller is going to want is to see very little closing costs, if any. Okay, so what do we do about that? Number one, there's a number of ways you can deal with that. Number one is you can bring the money to the table yourself, the buyer can, and not ask the seller to pay for it. Oftentimes the buyer's in a pinch and can't do that. Another way to do it is to inflate the price. Let's say you want $5,000 in closing costs. So instead of offering, let's say $400 and no closing costs, you offer $405 and $5,000 in closing costs. And because what's happening is now the buyer has to be able to afford a loan off of $405 rather than $400, yet they save themselves the need to bring the $5,000 in cash. So lifting the, let's say paying 90% loan on an extra $5,000 might result in $20 extra per month on a mortgage. That's no problem. They'd rather have that than having to bring $5,000 in cash. Another possible solution is you go to the lender and say, hey, you're quoting us at a 3% interest rate. Can you quote us at a 3.25% interest rate? And you increase the interest rate, and that will offset a portion of the closing cost. Okay, so you can reduce the closing cost by inflating the interest rate. Now, of course, they have to be able to afford the home off the higher interest rate. Make sense? Those are the general solutions on how to navigate the closing cost contribution potential issue. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on. Closing date and possession. Closing date, it is all this stuff is negotiable. Okay, closing date, which you generally see is a closing date that is in the neighborhood of about a month from the offer date. Cash closings, it's usually more like 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, with a cash closing, really all you need to do is have the property inspected, An appraisal is not necessary. Sometimes the buyer will do it, sometimes they won't. And then you need to allow for the title to be cleared. The title can be cleared very quickly if the property is not in a homeowners association. If the property is in a homeowners association, oftentimes they are the people that are dragging the whole deal longer because they've got to make sure that there's no back payment on HOA fees and these kind of things. Make sense? Okay, so closing date, I would say you generally should be somewhere in the 30 to 35 days from the closing date. Okay, if you see anything less than that, and you are a seller and the buyer submits an offer that is less than 30 days, the very first thing you want to do is call the buyer's lender and say, hey, the buyer is suggesting we can close in 26 days. How can you do that? Right? Do you foresee a problem there? Some places can do it, no problem. But that is a sign that you want to ask another question. Make sense? It's also, by the way, something that can be negotiated if the seller has anything unique. Remember how I said if you're in multiple offers, you go back to the seller and say, hey, tell me a little bit about what's important to the seller. Well, the seller might say, well, actually, I'd like a 75-day closing because of such and such a reason. Doesn't make a difference, right? Say, oh, okay. So you can give them a 75-day closing if that works for you and your buyer. And for all the other buyer's agents that didn't bother to ask that question, and they gave a 30, 35-day closing, the seller might look at your offer more advantageously because you actually care about what they care about. Y'all see how that question can really work?
Yes.
So ask that question. Hey, what is it that you guys are looking for? Because we want to win. Okay. Now, some of their requests may not match up with what your buyer's willing to do. That's okay. At least we know. Okay. Possession generally transfers to the purchaser at closing. That is not a steadfast rule, but I'd say probably 8 times out of 10, that's the way it looks. The possession takes place at closing, meaning the keys are handed to the buyer at closing. Quick little note on that. I know it's super convenient sometimes for the buyer to move their crap into the garage before closing. I don't really care. Buyer's not doing anything with the house that ain't theirs. That's just my personal opinion on that. Okay. So they'll get possession when the money is exchanged. Imagine you let your buyer move in all the stuff into your garage, and then something is a hiccup at the last second with the loan, and now you got some random dude that can't even afford your home's crap in your garage. Right? It's not particularly fun. So with that said, do not allow possession early just because somebody asked you to. Make sense?
Bill,
Okay.
and
Yes,
in the reverse, I had a situation where I bought a house and they couldn't get their stuff out. Like they had waited too long. And is there a way to, I never want to be in that position again. Is there something you could put
I
as
mean, the
a,
contract specifically states that they have to vacate at a certain time. So there's, to put something in over on top of that is not particularly necessary. It's kind of
what
one
if
of
they're
those
not
things.
out though?
Say that one more time.
They weren't out.
So you may not close. So you show up at the closing table because you just came from, or you show up, let's say Friday morning to do your walkthrough, and they still got a bunch of stuff there. And the closing's supposed to be Friday at lunchtime, and you call the other agent and say, hey, what's going on? We're supposed to close. Why is your stuff, guy's stuff still here? Right? There's usually some type of like, oh my gosh, the moving truck got in an accident. They'll be there at 2 o'clock or something like that. I mean, there's always these like random things that happen.
Right.
And you just try to put everyone together on the same page and make sure everyone's trying to get to the same place. Right. I have helped box up buyers of my listings before because it was time to get out and no one was there to help them. Right. Sometimes we just do what we got to do. All right. The other, this is what I thought you were going to talk about, Greta, is what's called a temporary occupancy. That would be like, let's say we close on a Friday and then the possession is exchanged, let's say on Monday. And that would be something that could be negotiated. Okay. Now remember, as of closing, the new buyer is now paying tax, they're, prorated taxes, they're paying interest on the loan, they're the owners of the home. Okay. There's a document called the temporary occupancy agreement, which details what the purchaser and the seller's obligations are during that time period, right after closing, before the exchange happens, possession exchange happens. Keeping insurance and these kind of things. Generally, again, everything is negotiable. What I have seen most often is when the temporary occupancy agreement is like for a couple days, 2 or 3 days, there's generally no money exchanged hands, right? Even though the new buyer technically, even though the new buyer is, how would I say that? The seller has sold their home to the new buyer. So the new buyer is paying for it, yet the seller's still living there, right? So the buyer is paying for the seller to live there. If it's for 2 or 3 days, generally you don't see much money change hands. If it's for more than that, generally there is some form of a prorated financial exchange. So let's say it costs the new owner $80 a day to live there, then the buyer would write a check for that amount. Or I'm sorry, the seller would write a check for that amount per day to stay there, like if they were going to stay there for 2 weeks or something. The people that I've seen that happen most often for are like really elderly sellers. Sometimes they get really scared about, boxing up all their stuff and for fear that the deal might not go through. Okay, there's no like rule of that. I've just seen more often than not, that's what I've seen. Make sense?
Hey, Bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that makes sense. So, and tell me if this is true, because I've heard that a lot of the times, like the buyer's agent will inflate that so that it encourages the seller to be out at that time. Like if it was, okay,
more
you're
than
gonna
what it
end up,
actually costs.
yeah, like $500 a day, that's going to really motivate the seller to be out of that house.
Well, there's a little bit of a nuance there. One is, there's actually 2 numbers. One is what it costs to live there, and one is what the holding over rate is. So for example, let's say it's a week and we charge $100 a day for the privilege of being there for a week. Then there's another part in the temporary occupancy agreement that says, what is the holding over amount? Meaning like, if you're not out by the day you're supposed to be out, then now we're talking about $300 a day or $400 a day or $500 a day. So there's a stiff penalty to not leaving in time, but you're not imposing a penalty on what has already been mutually agreed upon. Do you see the nuance there? So there's
Kind of
one that's
fuzzy.
a fee to be there in a contractually agreed upon time, and then secondly, there's a fee to be there when you've overstayed your welcome.
Oh, okay. So overstayed that contractual date that you agreed on.
Yes, that should be a very high penalty. But if you just agree to be there because that was a mutual agreement, then that should probably definitely should cover the cost of owning the home. For the new buyers incurring probably a little bit more also. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, next section, holder of the earnest money, section 5. Again, negotiable. Anybody can hold the earnest money. My preference would be, if you're filling out the offer, make it us, Keller Williams Realty Consultants. Okay. Closing attorney, you can put down O'Kelly and Sorhan, you can put down Campbell and Brannon. The seller made a request that we use Fryer Law Firm, which is down near the house. We agreed to that. It wasn't a big deal. I've worked with Fryer before. They did everything right. Okay. So we put Fryer Law Firm down there. Section 7, earnest money shall be paid by check, by cash, or by wire transfer. Check whichever one is appropriate. I did not have the earnest money in hand when we wrote the offer, so I checked section B, which says $4,000 will be delivered within 3 days of binding agreement date. So once we went under contract, I stopped by my guy's house, or actually he dropped it off in my mailbox because he lives right around the corner. I took it into the office and I turned it in using the office's earnest money protocol. Okay. Then I sent a copy of the earnest money to the other side, so to the listing agent, so that they would know that the earnest money had been turned in a timely fashion. Okay. Earnest money. Generally, you will see that earnest money is a minimum of 1%. You want to make it painful enough where the buyer doesn't just blow it off. So for example, if they're buying a $500,000 house and the earnest money is $1,500, if they violate the contract, then yes, you could sue them and all that, I get it, but more than likely you're just going to take the earnest money. $1,500 to somebody who owns a $500,000 house is not nearly as painful as $1,500 is to somebody who's buying a $100,000 house. Does that make sense? I'm not minimizing the importance of the money. I'm just telling you, you want to make sure it's painful. So if somebody submits an offer for your $300,000 listing and they want to give $600 in earnest money, no, that's not enough for me to encourage my seller to take the home off the market, particularly in this environment. Okay, oftentimes what you see in multiple offers is that's one of the things that they adjust, is instead of offering 1% or close to 1%, they might offer 2, 3, 4%, because they're telling the seller, hey, I'm not planning on messing around with this contract, right? If they leave the deal for ways that they're allowed to leave the deal, that money comes back to them in full anyway. It's just simply if they violate the contract, that's what could be retained. Make sense? Okay. Let's cover section 8, and then we'll move on and finish the rest tomorrow, part 2. Okay, section 8, due diligence period. Due diligence period, as we know, is essentially a free look period. So the buyer and seller go under contract, and then you have X number of days. In this scenario, we had 9. Again, I was competing with some people. The most common number of days is 10, I found. So I put 9 to stand out, right? Didn't really make much of a difference. You know, I'd already meanwhile contacted my inspector. I said, hey, we're close on 1. What's your schedule look for the next few days? You see what I'm saying? So as you get closer and closer, you are starting to reach out to all the other players that are involved. Hey, inspector. Hey, termite guy. Hey, radon guy. How you looking for the next couple of days? I'm going to have a contract placed in your lap in two minutes, right? So for example, he says, oh, I got an opening tomorrow morning, and I can get you the inspection report within 15 hours, then I don't necessarily need 10 days. But if the guy can't come out to me for 7 days, then I may need to find another home inspector for that one. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So I want to say one thing about home inspections before I leave today, okay? Don't let me forget. So 9 days from binding agreement date, that is calendar days. That includes federal holidays, that includes weekends, that includes all calendar days. Binding agreement is day 0, basically. So you have binding agreement. The following day is day 1. The day after that is day 2. All of these time periods count simultaneously. Everyone clear on that? Section B of inspection, option money, I heard for the very first time anyone ever using that this week. Okay, which is a payment that is made directly to the seller for the opportunity to enter into the due diligence period. So let's just say, for example, you put $2,000 there. You're giving $2,000 to the seller to have this option period or this due diligence period. If you leave the contract during the due diligence period or during any contingency, that money stays with the seller. There's another line on here that says it shall or shall not be applied to the purchase price. You could check either one. That is one of the things we're starting to see a little bit more to separate yourself from the competition in a multiple offer situation. So is the buyer willing to pay for the due diligence period? If I've got 2 offers next to each other, one that's going to give my seller an extra $2,000 and one that's not, I might choose this one. See what I'm saying? Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. There was a comment this weekend about home inspections in the chat. I just want to take 2 seconds to address that. I'm not going to say that actually I probably am going to say, if a home inspector, a professional home inspector, is only willing to take $250 for their home inspection, they don't know what the hell they're doing. That's a pretty clear indication for me. I don't need to hear anything else. It's not enough. It's not enough. Okay. Home inspections generally are at least $300 to $350. Okay. You guys ever heard the line? You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good quality. Pick two. Right? If you want it good quality and cheap, it's not going to be fast. Right? Because it's going to be at the bottom of that guy's list for a long time because you're not paying him enough. Okay. If you want it good quality and fast, it's not going to be cheap. Make sense? If you want it cheap and fast, it's not going to be good quality. Y'all see that? I find it, you know, many of you guys know my wife is a photographer, and not to go into a big diatribe about that, but I love it when people are like, oh, I want a photographer. I just want to find one that's really cheap. Is that the thing that's most important to you? Are you looking for good pictures? Or are you looking to spend the least amount of money? I'm confused. You see what I'm saying? Same thing about realtors. Hey, I'm looking for a realtor that charges as little as possible. Oh, so what you're suggesting is you're looking for a realtor that has the least amount of negotiation skills? Is that what you're suggesting? I'm confused. Are you looking for the realtor that's going to protect your investment? Or are you looking for the realtor that's already negotiated away their commission? Does that resonate with you guys?
Yes.
Somebody give me some feedback on that. There'll always be, y'all ever seen that picture of the guy getting a tattoo? Talking about there'll always be somebody to do it cheaper. Have y'all ever seen that?
Yeah.
See if I can find it real fast. Always be cheaper. This picture right here. Guy brings in like this, you know, horsey thing. And this person, look at the picture he drew. Right? There is always somebody who will do it cheaper. See that? Come on. $250 for home inspections, just flat out not enough. Hey, I'm looking for the best home inspector in town. The one that'll show me all the things that I didn't know existed. Not, hey, I'm looking for the cheapest home inspector I can find. Okay? Is that helpful?
Gotcha.
All right, tune in tomorrow. I will access the purchase and sale agreement from Command. I will get my assistant to remind me what my passcode is. And we'll go through the second half of this document, okay? And we'll touch on all the changes from 2021.
Right.
Oh, one last thing. So did anyone put in their numbers? I think unless somebody beat Nadine, she is going to be the winner. Julian, close. Ashley, close. All right, I think Nadine is going to be the winner. Yep. All right, congratulations, Nadine Dixon. Y'all better watch out for her. She did 131 contacts last month. Woo! Or last week. 58 people to the database. All right.
Great job.
All right, you guys. Rest up, I guess. You guys are awful quiet today. Come on, it's February 1st. Let's go out and make a difference. All right, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Bill.